I was graduated from Weaver High, and it was June of 1943. And I had enrolled at the University of Connecticut for a summer session. And when I turned 18 in that summer, I went to the draft board, and that was the beginning of my military career. So I went to in September, went to Fort Devens, and from there went to Fort Belvoir, which is a training center, for engineer training center. And
Fort Devens was basic training?
For basic training and engineer training. It was an engineer training center. It's just outside, maybe 10 miles or so from Washington, D.C. And what happened next?
Well, you went to Fort Belvoir.
I went to Fort Belvoir. From there, I went to school in New York, electricity, New York Trade School, for 3 months. And after that, I had a leave of absence, leave for 15 days, and then I went to what's the name of that place? Camp Shenango. It was in Pennsylvania. After that, I was there how long? A couple of months, I guess. Went to Camp Shanks, and there boarded the Queen Mary.
Just back up one. What were you doing at Shenango?
Just waiting for orders. Waiting for orders.
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah. From there, I went to Camp Shanks, and from there aboard the Queen Mary. It took us to Glasgow in 3.5 days. And unaccompanied, no convoy. But no convoy because the ship was so fast that the submarine couldn't catch up with it. The German submarines were all over the place, but anyway, landed in Glasgow. From there, I went to a huge, absolutely huge replacement depot, somewhere. I don't know the name of the place. I forgot the name of the place, but it was 36 miles east of Liverpool, and I was there, just there again, waiting to be assigned somewhere. I was there for a couple of months, I guess, and then shortly after D-Day, I got shipped to France, the coast of France, and there took a train ride, very slow train ride, through France, through Belgium, to Winselen in the Netherlands, to Winselen. And there I joined the 246th Engineer Combat Battalion. And they were on R&R for a little while. And that began my career with the 246. They had most of the work was road work, keeping the roads, keeping the streets clear for the vehicles to move wherever. There were two major battles that I was in. One was the Battle of the Hurricane Forest, and the other was the crossing of the Roar River at Ulick.
Which river?
The Roar, R-O-E-R. I'll tell you about both of these places. If you read that, you read my document there. Why don't you read my document there? That tells a lot about it. That's, you know, in my own words there, I wrote the whole thing up. I think you might, you know, be edified by what I had to say there. That misadventure in the Hurricane was one. And I have a few comments to make about that. One, this was a time, the winter time, where the cold was brutal. It went down well below zero many nights, down to 24 below. Unhappily, we were very ill prepared for this. The shoes that we had were awful. We were not well dressed. Thanks to General Bradley, who told everybody that the Germans were going to capitulate by Christmas time. Told quartermaster, don't bother sending any warm clothes to the front because they're going to collapse. Well, it didn't happen, but he had everybody believing that Germans couldn't continue on because of, you know, fighting a war in two fronts. Secondly, the United States Army never should have been there, in that forest. This battle started in September, and the forest was not cleared of the enemy until February. So it took 6 months the Germans were very well entrenched, had their artillery on the hills, and had a command of all of the U.S. maneuvers. And it was said that if the troops, American troops, took maybe 1,000 yards in a day, they could, you know, did something remarkable. The trees were so close together, they could hardly move. There was no place to be winning or no place to be carrying out a battle. We didn't belong there. We should have either, you know, gone south or bypassed it, gone around one with the other. But once we're there, General Hodges, First Army General Hodges, decided that we're there and we're going to stay there. General Marshall, no relation, Chief of Staff General Marshall, came over to take a look at the situation and said, we're not moving out of here. Army pride. Army pride. Going to stay here. The casualties were enormous. The division, 28th Division, the 4th Division went in there. They got decimated. You see, that's when the Battle of the Bulge started. This is a northern flank. This is a northern extension of the Battle of the Bulge. There was worry that General Collins, who was up north on the northern border, in the northern flank of the forest, figured he has to go into the fort to protect his flank. There was no way that the Germans were going to make any kind of offensive through in that area. No way. It's no place for we could hunt. The armor couldn't move because of the trees. There were very few roads. There were just very few what we call fire breaks. The whole idea was insane. Going through that heavily wooded area and thinking that the Germans might possibly make a thrust to the north. No way that they were going to do that. We had no business being there.
What were your day-to-day duties?
Nighttime. Nighttime operation. We were there for 2 weeks. I was there with the Company A, the 246. And I was one of the few people who know what they were doing, by the way. It was a double apron barbed wire fence. You know what that is? It's pretty, you know, it's a good idea. I mean, defensively, it's a very good idea where you have a conventional barbed wire fence, but then there's an apron that goes on either side of that fence, and over that apron are another strands of wire. So it's to get through that fence, that takes some doing, without really hurting yourself. So anyway, we started the first night we were there. The truck that was carrying the wire turned over or whatever. I don't know what happened to it, but it made a lot of noise. And the Germans figured that something's going on, so they opened up with their artillery. And that went on for, the man right ahead of me got hit. I wrote about that there. Norman Sorensen. He got barely wounded. And that firing went on for, that's scary stuff. Well, you know what artillery fire is like. It's scary stuff. It's not like being shot when you get hit with an artillery, artillery shrapnel, tears you apart. And the infantry troops that were in there had some cover. They were in their foxholes. We were standing out there in the snow, just standing there, doing, just trying to keep ourselves as motionless as possible. So, anyway, the fire. So there maybe 2 or 3 of us. We found a ledge that we took shelter under, and the officers got together and said, "We can't. No sense in staying here. Can't build a fence under these conditions." So we went back to the trucks and went back to the town there. But the next night we were up there again for 2 weeks putting up that fence. And it was completely unnecessary, as far as I'm concerned. The building the fence, like I said, the Germans were never going to make an offensive against that, through that forest. I'm sounding like, critical of Army maneuvers. But they deserve to be criticized. I got 3 books here about that forest, about that battle. One of them called the criminally negligent, putting the troops into a situation like that when there was an alternative. The object was they realized eventually there was a dam, the Schwammenau Dam, had to be taken to get to the Rhine. That Raw River had to be crossed first. And there was a town of Schmidt, Schmidt, that had to be taken. That was at the edge of the forest on the eastern side. That had to be taken because that town of Schmidt controlled the road to the dam. But that dam was a huge earthen dam, very, very large. And that had to be taken so that the river would not flood. So anyway, they finally got, I think the 78th Division took the dams and stopped the water from flowing, stopped the river from more flooding that took place. There was some flooding. Anyway, every night when we were there, the German artillery started up for maybe, 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes, and stopped. And by February 10th, that we happened, February 10th, I guess. This had to do with February 10th. I don't remember, February 10th. Anyway, whatever. So we strung, I said in my report there, so 37 miles of wire for fencing. over a couple of weeks, couple of nights. We were there every night for 2 weeks in the forest. Like I said, we were not prepared to do this. Our gloves were awful. They were so flimsy. Handling barbed wire with very flimsy gloves. I was cold with my feet. I froze my feet 3 or 4 times. It was so cold. Brutal cold. And, there was a TV program called Biography, where it was about General Bradley, who was a buddy of Eisenhower. And he won the war all by himself, to listen to that biography. The military made some terrible mistakes. Terrible, very, very costly mistakes. Well, you were in Vietnam, you know what that's all about.
Yes.
Military mentality. Anyway. Schmid was taken by the 78th Division, and the dam was closed, so there's no more flooding of the river. But they had to wait for the floodwaters to recede for a while before crossing could start. And that took. When we finished with in the forest, we were living in that town of Vicht, and then we it was in a house. What's called it was an agricultural community, but probably a farmhouse or whatever it was. And we moved from there to Bergen, which is a village that had a pond where we could practice putting a bridge together. And I'll tell you this little story about 2 Messerschmitts. There was in that house, I think there was a squad, about 12 of us there. And for heat, we had a cast iron stove, which burned coal. So, December 25th, Christmas morning, nice and bright day. One of the few days where we had sunlight. Almost every day was cloudy. Dark December was called. Dark December. Anyway, December 25th. I'm given the assignment of emptying the stove. Take out the ashes. Okay, after I do that, I'm standing on the rim of the road. There was a gravel road. And down this road came 2 Messerschmitts with their machine guns firing. And I stood there fascinated. The noise of the engines was something else. But here I was watching the bullets strike the gravel there. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I better get out of here. So, which I did. Ran across the street, across the road there, and there was a ditch on the other side. So I remained there for a little while. And we had, up in back of our house there, was a 50 caliber machine gun, anti-aircraft gun. And our man up there was firing at those 2 planes. And this one plane, I look up, and I see this aircraft, this Messerschmitt, up in the hill, going. By the way, when they were going up the road, they were very, very, only just a few feet above the rooftop. This plane, the first plane, comes by very, very low to the ground. All of a sudden, it bounces, it hits the ground and bounces. Picks up again, bounces again. The pilot flew out of it, sailed through the air, and landed there was a bunker there. one of the German bunkers, part of the Siegfried line, and he landed on his back. He was dead, of course, landed on his back. But say, that was quite spectacular. That was quite spectacular, you know? I'm watching all this. Every other German pilot all carried a sidearm, either a P-38 or a Luger. Got to get a souvenir. So Sergeant Taylor and I think someone named Jose Aha. I think the two of them started to run up the hill to get there before anybody else does it, to retrieve that pilot's weapon. Okay, they're halfway up the hill, and the second plane comes roaring in and start firing at him. Well, he hit the sergeant in the leg, and he hit his companion right through the middle. You know how big those slugs are? The 50 caliber, you get hit by one of those, you really knock you down. So, anyway, they got evacuated, and a little bit later I decided I'd walk up the hill and see what's what, which I did, and there's that pilot. There were several other people hanging around, and there's that pilot lying on his back. He had no face. So he was completely faced him. All you saw was blood and brains. It was a pretty crazy, you know. Say, hey, that's a, you know, he deserved it. He was, you know, he's the enemy. He deserves what he got, but, you know, it was kind of, you know, that kind of, you know, wow. So anyway, that's what happened. And we went back to Hangen, to where there was this pool or pond where we trained, did some more training for the river crossing. And February 22nd, it was here 22nd of February. By then is my wife coming in. By that time, the waters had receded to the point where they felt it was, you know, okay to make a crossing. And this took place at night, 3:30 in the morning. And I was on the riverbank. Well, we were in this we were in the basement of this house, right along the river. And it was our squad. And I was in a wetsuit. Okay, so anyway, we're in the basement, and I had a wetsuit on because I was going to be in the water. And at 3:30 in the morning, the American artillery started up. And the noise was beyond description. I don't know how many batteries were involved. Well, I remember reading in the Stars and Stripes was the military newspaper. It said that 400 tons of explosives had landed on that one town. That was the town of Julich, Julich. And how any Germans survived that barrage, I don't know. It was the sky was almost red with the tracer trails. So, the town says, okay, boys, let's go to work. Which we did. Went out to the riverbank, and I got into the water. My job was to, I had a wetsuit. My job was to, a crew was, there was a truck carrying the pontoons. Several trucks carrying the pontoons. And there was a crew from our squad that brought the pontoons up to the riverbank. And I took it from there and passed it over to the Sergeant Rudd was on top of the first platoon, first pontoon, and he was putting in pins or whatever to make the connection to connect the pontoon that was up. I was handling it, but he kept passing it over to him. But I was in the water and he was up in the. And it was also like a cable had to have been strung from our side to the Irish side to hook up the pontoons so they wouldn't. So the current was pretty fast, current running pretty hard. And there was another man out there when the pontoon hooking up the pontoon to this cable. So I'm going to show you some pictures of that. What that was all about. I can show you pictures of that. Show you to it right now.
Okay. I want to ask one question. How far across the river was
Well,
it estimated?
it had, like you said, it was beyond its banks because of the flooding. I would estimate maybe 50 yards.
So you got the bridge built and the troops got across.
You can saw from that picture the current was fairly strong. But the artillery, the American artillery, initially the barrage lasted for about 3/4 of an hour. Then it started to slacken off. But it almost it took us 4.5 hours to put that bridge together. And I would say the artillery, like you said, slackened off, but all through the night it kept firing, but not with the intensity that it started off with. Like I said, it wanted to me that anti-German ever have survived it, because I mean they really took a tremendous pounding. Like I said, I don't know how many batteries were involved. I don't know, but there were guns firing off from all over the place. And anyway, there's another report here. If you take a look at it, the presidential citation, which I have. It does on the left side. So the 246 presidential unit citation gives an account of what we experienced and the building of that. There were other bridges. We have three foot bridges, and some treadway bridge, a floating bridge, whatever, or further on down the stream. That the other elements of the 246 are putting those in place, so that the tanks could go across. By the way, there was this to string the cable. There was maybe 4 people in the boat carrying the cable. Sergeant Taylor recovered from his wound there, and he was one of them. There were 2 or 3 others, and some of these artillery pieces, the shells were landing along the shore. Some of them were phosphorus shells. That's deadly. That causes terrible burns. Anyway, what I had heard, one of the 4 in that group was a newcomer he had been in the company in our platoon more than a month, and he got hit, probably by friendly fire, probably. But I was told that later he was such pain he was taking his helmet trying to knock himself out because the pain was so bad. Never saw him again. I don't know what happened to him. By the way, there was when the lieutenant says, "All right, boys, let's go to work." One of the members of that squad said, "I'm not going out there." Lieutenant says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Hey, I'm staying right here." "Don't you move. Don't you move. I'll talk to you later. We'll talk about this later, Ron." You never saw him again. Whatever happened to him, that was like desertion, basically, So anyway, I don't know what his job was. What he's supposed to say. I don't remember what his job was. Anyway, we were all the whole squad was busy putting one of those 3 bridges together, and under some fire from German fire. So But those are two.
After the bridges, what did you do?
Well, we went back to where we started from, went back to Vic, and from there, the next job we had was got to clean up the street, and that was a big job. I mean, all the rubber from all the city was, the jewelry was completely smashed to pieces, and we spent several days working on that, clearing up the. That's what basically what we did. Most of the time we road work, clearing up the street, both in both the town, the city or the town where we were operating at was called Coastlar, and right across the river was this town of Hewlett, which I said had to be taken in order we moved in order to get to the Rhine. So after that was the rest of the time. We went to, after we finished that job there at Hewlett, cleaning up, we moved to Mönchengladbach. Mönchengladbach, that's the provincial capital of the Rhineland. And we were there for several days. Then we crossed the Rhine at Basel, crossed the Rhine. And we went to what's called the Lüneburger Heide. Lüneburger Heide, which is a flat, northern Germany is a quite big flat. The Heide, because the meadow, open land. And went through Hamelin, Piper Hamelin, went through Hamelin, went to Hanover, Braunschweig, up to Magdeburg. Magdeburg was about 30 miles from west of Berlin. Then we turned around, didn't go any further. For most of the time we were just traveling and doing some road work. Most of the pick and shovel, That's what the engineers did most of the time. And then we went to Goslar, and that's where the war ended. We were in Goslar.
What's the town?
Goslar, Goslar, Goslar.
How did you find out the war was over?
Nighttime. I hear some rifles going off. Rifle fire. I said, wait a minute, I better grab my weapon there and say, maybe the Germans making an attack. The Germans making an attack. I come to find out it was a celebration. The war had come to a close with some firing, some rifle fire. That was on May 8th.
When you were in the forest and building the bridges, what did you have for food?
Most of the time, I think it pretty much K rations. But there was a company. There was a kitchen, a truck, and a cook, a couple of cooks, and a baker, and whatever, and a permanent KP. They tried to feed us. They tried to, most of the time, tried to feed us good hot meals. Tried to do that, but when the situation was such that we couldn't do it, we had K rations. They weren't too bad. They were pretty good, actually. There were 3 meals. You know what they are, the K rations? You know what they were? They were in packages, in cans of like cheese and ham and whatever, and biscuits, and they were pretty good. There was something called C rations. They were awful. Made everybody sick. They were in cans of meat in cans, but they were awful. Anyway, that's what the milk. And there was a bar of chocolate called D ration. So anyway, but we were fed pretty well. We can't complain about being fed.
But you were ill-clothed.
But what?
You were ill-clothed.
Ill-clothed. They were closed. Like I said, I have problems with my feet today, and I blame it on the fact that my feet got frozen several times. Yeah, like I said, that was they said that was the first time in however many years that the temperature dropped as low as that. It was one of the coldest periods, coldest winters they've had there for several years. And we just happened to be there at that wrong time, you know?
Yeah.
But,
After VE Day, what happened to you then?
the war with Japan was still going on. And the 246 broke up. And here's what happened. The colonel, there was a colonel, don't remember his name, didn't like what had happened there at the end of the war when all the rifle fire. He didn't like that. He was going to be punished for that. So we moved ourselves from Goslar, which is a nice, comfortable place, to a wooded area. I think the name of the town was Burkhardt, or something like that. Burkhardt. In the woods, lives in the woods in a tent. It's a punishment. So, anyway, it was rather uncomfortable. You had to wash yourself out of your helmet. However, anyway, so the 246 broke up, and I was assigned to another engineering unit, which is a new engineering unit that was going to take a ship to Japan, to the Pacific. And we took a long ride from, the name of the town was Anspach, something like that, Anspach. Took a long ride from there down to Marseille, waiting for a ship to come in, waiting to board a ship to go to the Pacific. And in Marseille, and we lived in a compound there outside the city, waiting for however long, till September, I guess. Yeah, about September. And Japan surrendered. I guess it was in September, whenever it was. August. And it was called the 1256 Engineer Battalion. And that broke up. And I and several others boarded a truck and made the trip back up to Germany. All the way up. We went the trip back and forth was down along the Rhone River. Nice scenery, you know. Along the Rhone River. Anyway, we went up to Bremerhaven, which was a seaport along the North Sea. And I was there from, I guess, September to April, for about 9 months there. So we all had numbers, being shipped home, how long you have been in the service, and whatever. And finally my name came up. So but I was there for my job. I spoke German, so I was employed more or less as an interpreter while I was in Bremerhaven. and I had a little job of going it was a company, a German company, was building facilities because Bremerhaven was going to be used as the port of entry for American troops coming in for occupation purposes. And that was the docking area for occupation troops. So they were building these buildings for housing the troops from the United States to be dispersed all throughout Germany as occupation troops. Anyway, so I had a job of going to an office and picking up some material that I passed over to somebody. Anyway, it was a very cushy job. Yeah, it was a cushy job. So,
and in September April you...
In April I boarded the ship to come home in April on what was called a Liberty ship. Nothing like the Queen Mary, I can tell you that. Nothing like that. It took 11 days to cross the Atlantic. And I got seasick, of course. Yeah, seasick. Hardly ate anything for 11 days. Lorna doing biscuits. Then after 11 days, docked in New York. And went through Devon's. From there, and got discharged. That was on April 16th. April 16th, 1945. 46.
What'd you do after that?
Went home and lounged around doing nothing, I think, for a while. Then I signed up again for the University of Connecticut.
Went on the GI Bill?
On the GI Bill. Yeah. Took advantage of that. And then went to the University of Vermont for a master's degree. So
in what?
In German and English.
And what'd you do then? After you got your master's?
Tried to get a job and was unsuccessful. For whatever reason. So I went to work for a construction company. Anyway, that little story. I don't know what it was now. So all in all, I can tell you this. This happened how many years ago? 61 years. Those two events that I talked to you about with some detail. I can remember that as if it happened just yesterday. I was just a kid. I mean, really, just a boy, with very impressionable age. I was at 19. And because of its intensity and the strangeness that something that you don't experience in normal life. You don't experience things like that. It was so out of the ordinary, so scary, and yet exciting at the same time. And the details, I can remember just handling that wire, for example, just the feel of it, I can remember doing that. And like I said, certain things that the routine, road repair and whatever, that's everyday stuff. But by the way, one time we were in the Netherlands. The first few days that I joined up the company there, I was on guard duty just outside the city. There, to Winseland. It was in Winseland in the Netherlands, standing guard with another guy at nighttime. and it's very, very dark. And the ground, the topography there was completely flat, like the Netherlands, the lowlands, you know. And this is maybe 4 or 5 nights into when I signed up, when I became a part of the 246. So he and I are standing out there in the road, and I hear this machine gun chattering. And I said, "You've been in this situation many hours or days or whatever. A week before I came here, how far away do you figure that noise is? How far away is that gun going off?" He says, "I say about 5 miles." I said, "Well, wait a minute." You know, I said, "I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I'm right here where I am, rather than, you know, where the noise is coming from." So, anyway, it's funny how funny you remember something like that. I remember something, like I said, how many decades later.
Do you have dreams or nightmares?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Did you when you first got home?
I don't think so.
Aside from your feet that are still affected by cold, did you have any other lingering
No,
effects?
not really. Well, yeah, I did. I had it's called alopecia areata. That's where your hair falls out in spots, not total. Sometimes it's almost total baldness, and I blame that on my military. I blamed it on my military experience. Eventually, I went to several doctors, and I finally got a drug that took care of it. But yeah, stress. There was stress related. Yeah.
And after you joined the construction company after the war, did you continue to work in construction, or?
I had several different jobs. Eventually, I ended up, when I married my wife, I had a shoe store here in town.
Oh.
Yeah. On Hot Meadow Street, where Maple Tree, where the Maple Tree is. There used to be a 5 and 10, but like a Kresge's area, Woolworth was a 5 and 10 on that corner there, corner of Plank Hill Road and Hot Meadow Street. And I was right next door there. It was Hofford's Pharmacy. So I lived in this town for a long time. Yeah. So, but like I said,
how do you feel about the military in general?
okay, I'll tell you something. I think of any government function, I think the military has more incompetent people in it than any other branch, any other element of government. They made some terrible, terrible mistakes. That Battle of the Bulge never should have happened. Why do I say that? All kinds of information kept flowing into headquarters about the Germans building up, borrowing money from the Russian front. All kinds of reports. A woman came in, was taken prisoner. She was crossing into the American section, telling anybody would listen. The railroad cars were doing muffled tracks, muffled trucks, muffled sounds. Radio silence. Germans were talking to each other. They were talking to each other, but not by radio. That should have been right there. The fact that they were not speaking to each other on the radio. Something's up. And General Bradley said, when the attack began on September 16th, oh, don't worry about it. It's not just like a spoiling attack. Nothing's going to happen. It nearly destroyed the United States. Nearly destroyed our army there. Nearly. Get close, very close. But there was all kinds of indications that the Germans were building up. Information flowed from enemy. You remember there was a movie called Dana Andrews was in it, Robert Ryan. It was a bad movie, but this business about information that they simply disregarded. They couldn't believe that Germans had enough manpower to mount such a attack. Couldn't believe that. And that General Hodges, First Army, General Hodges, General Collins said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen. General Bradley, he was one of Eisenhower's buddy, but Eisenhower understood, something bad going on. But they made a very heavy impression. Very, very, and it was a very, 80,000, by the way, there was a tremendous casualties there in the hurricane. Tremendous casualties.
That is something I wanted to ask. In your unit, in the 246, a lot, heavy casualties.
There were throughout the course of its history. Yes, there were. Yes, couple three pages of wounded or killed. Like the only one I experienced was that Norman Sorensen, who got hit there. The first shelling.
You were never hit?
No, I wasn't. Came very, very close. Very close. I saw the blast at the tree that hit him. A blue flash of blue light hit the tree, and I was right just a few feet away from him. So, anyway, they repaired him. The 246 had a reunion in Las Vegas, and I went there with my daughter and met him there, Norman Sorensen, and you could see from his arm that he had been repaired. But anyway, they evacuated him. They evacuated him fairly quickly, and he was in the hospital for over a year. So anyway, my impression is that the military never learns from experience. They make the same mistakes over and over again. Well, I have a friend in Massachusetts, Carl Pluran. He was in Vietnam for 2 years, and he tells me these terrible stories about the things that the officers did, things that the military did. That you wonder how we ever won the war. There was terrible incompetence, terrible mistakes. You wonder how. I used to go to the high school every March. Dick Dart called me. He was up in charge of the program there. Dick Dart called me. He said, "You want to come over to the high school and talk to this history students, American history?" And I tell them, "Yeah, okay. I'll give you a choice. I'll talk to you about my war experiences. I'll tell you about my experiences as a victim of the Depression." Neither one of them cheerful subjects, Anyway, I said, "Look, don't believe everything you read in your textbooks. I want you to know, as far as I'm concerned, the generals were idiots, absolute idiots, by not paying attention to information that came in great volume, saying the Germans are going to make an attack." Nothing didn't faze them. So, yes.
Have you attended many reunions?
That was the only one. The only one. I think they had one in Kalamazoo, but I saw a lot of the guys that went through my squad. My people in my squad were there. It was neat. Yeah, it was neat. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Thank you for this.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
for your
yeah,
service.
all right.